Welcome to Midweek Macro. It is Wednesday, the 8th of April 2026. It's just gone 11 Eastern. And of course, as always, there is a lot to look at, a lot going on in the markets. First of all, apologies if I come across as shouting or my voice is croaky. You would have seen I was at an AC/DC concert last night and it was very loud, to say the least, but it was very, very good. So, yes, apologies for a slightly croaky voice, or if I was speaking loudly, I can barely hear myself think and speak, to be honest, at the moment. Concerts aside, arguably the biggest news item to come out this week is the 2-week truce that's been agreed. And we can see the reactions in the markets thus far. I'll go through equities first and then we'll look at commodities afterwards. All I'll say on this is that I don't think we should get too excited about it. What I mean by that is obviously from a humanitarian point of view, it's very good, it's very positive. But I think there's a lot of other things bubbling under the surface. So we shouldn't get too carried away with it in terms of, President Trump has said this, or Iran has agreed to this, or, Israel's doing this. But there's a lot of underlying things, a lot of pieces to the puzzle, so to speak. We'll start with equities, as I said. There's a lot to talk about today. So we've seen that the S&P 500 is up. It is at 6,758 at the time of recording, so it's up about 175 points on the week. And Nasdaq up about 800 points on the week. It's currently trading at 24,848. Dow Jones continues to rock and roll. It's up 1,150 points. It sits at 47,652. The VIX, so again, that measures the volatility in the S&P 500. That is down 2.1 points, currently sat at 21.7. And then the dollar index taking a massive hit this week. Of course, that's not a surprise given a temporary truce being announced. It is down 1.376 points, so that leaves it at 98.81. So we're seeing, and again, that's just the US, of course. So we're seeing that there's a bit of a relief rally happening, and it wouldn't surprise me to see that happening for the next couple of weeks, personally. I'm not saying it's a case of onwards and upwards and we're off to all new time highs. It'd be interesting to see how high these markets do go. But for me, I would certainly not be taking the long position in US equities at present. I think it's going to be a relief rally. And again, I think the reason for that is that although there's a 2-week truce that's been announced, we should not take any of it as gospel. And it doesn't really solve any issues either. And I know that a lot was made, and we'll get on to oil in a bit. I know a lot was made of, right, that's it. Hormuz is reopened. Off we go. Things are back to normal. It's quite simply that's not the case. I'm far from a shipping expert, but I imagine if you've got, I believe I read earlier, about 800 tankers sat in and around the Strait of Hormuz, it's not just a case of switching a light from red to green and everyone starts traveling as normal. And we saw that even after a truce was announced anyway, again, Israel accusing Iran of firing missiles and so forth. So that's why we shouldn't read too much into it. Don't get carried away by the equities rebounding here. I don't think it's going to be a sustained move. Of course, I can always be wrong. I don't have access to, insider information or any other, news that might shape the markets from that point of view. It's interesting that the S&P, Nasdaq, Dow Jones, again, I'm not saying it's a perfect V-shaped rally because there's still a long way to go, but it's starting to look like that. So again, for the next 2 weeks, I would imagine equities would be to the upside. Let's see how much they can recover before making another assessment. But again, as always, everything in the Middle East, that's going to chop and change. It's going to change daily, but I wouldn't read too much into the news from yesterday, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, now going into the various commodities markets, of course, oil is the biggest loser thus far. And again, if you're just joining and you're not 100% sure what's gone on in the last 24 hours, then President Trump and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. That includes safe passage, apparently, through the Strait of Hormuz. Uh, let's see what happens with that. But that's really the key headline here. And we've seen oil. I'm looking at the WTI chart at the moment. WTI down $16.15, currently trading at $95.84. A massive hit. It had gone up to as high as 117, of course, at the start of the week. And then again, that news came through and it's taken a big nosedive since then. And again, what happens to oil moving forwards? If everything works swimmingly in the next couple of weeks, I would imagine that oil would continue to take a nosedive. However, as we've just said, I wouldn't read too much into any of this whatsoever. All it takes is a stray missile or a different country to get attacked, or friendly fire. Any one of those things to happen, and then we're likely off to the races again. So again, I know that yourselves as contrarian capitalists, you're not going to believe everything or believe anything that you read in mainstream media. Again, I would take it with a pinch of salt. Yes, understandably, oil has taken a big hit, and it is a news headline driven environment at the moment. I know we've covered oil demand issues before. I know that the stance of this channel is that this oil glut doesn't exist. It's been overreported. So there's basically supplies being overreported, demand is being underreported. So just from that technical foundation, that should set the scene for oil in the long run. In the short run, of course, it's very headline driven, again, as we have seen, again, looking at this chart. I'll quickly bring up Brent. I'll bring up the cash market because that's what we normally look at on the commodity wrap. Crude oil, Brent cash. This is via the black ball markets. I'm on trading view as well. So again, that is at $93.20, down $13.22 on the week. So it's down about 12.5%. And again, that shouldn't be a surprise. I'll reiterate for the final time, I'll reiterate this. Oil is a very headline driven commodity at the moment. We haven't even mentioned credit stresses, credit fractures. Funny how that disappears, by the way, when good geopolitical news comes through. Just saying. We have to remember those things haven't gone away. They will come back to bite equities in the ass at some point. Obviously, it's not the time for that to happen right now, but that is also worth watching for all the credit stresses and again how they will impact equities moving forward. So that's oil. What direction it takes from here, again, I honestly don't know. If the news in the next couple of weeks is good, and we do get some form of resemblance or some form of, dare I say, normality in terms of shipping, and again, I'm not expecting that to get back to normal straight away. That likely will take months, but the markets might perceive any sort of normality as good news. That could put pressure on the price to the downside in oil. That's my opinion. Of course, the opposite of that is, again, as mentioned, if you get friendly fire or, he said this or they said that, this happened, blah, 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 blah. I would imagine oil would go to the upside. And it is very, very difficult to tell at the moment. Looking at the metals, though, and again, in the commodity that comes out every Friday, there's a traffic light system in there for those that are listening that aren't paid subscribers. There's a traffic light system in there, and it's been quite useful the last few weeks. I went neutral to bullish on metals last week, purely because it was a contrarian thing to do. A lot of people saying there's a lot of pressure on gold, a lot of pressure on silver, and quite rightly so. my thesis, or my stance, sorry, certainly seems to be vindicated thus far. So we have gold sitting at $4,744. It's up $66 on the week, up 1.4%. And again, uh, a lot of pressure on gold. There could be a lot more pressure on gold moving forwards, especially if countries such as Turkey or maybe some of the countries in the Middle East, again, if things flare up again, which I imagine they would likely do so, if that proves selling pressure or provides selling pressure, that could put pressure on the gold price moving forwards. But also, I don't have the article in front of me, but I have read that it was the 17th month of consecutive Chinese buying, I think, in the markets for the Chinese central bank as well. So obviously they were taking advantage of the much lower prices that we had, especially a couple of weeks ago when gold touched 4,100. My point being that gold is up on the week thus far. And again, the more it goes under the radar, the better that probably is moving forwards. Let's see what happens with gold. But yes, it is up on the week. Silver, I imagine. I haven't seen the chart this morning. But yeah, again, looking very similar to gold in terms of for this week thus far and the last 2 weeks, we've got these little small green candles. So it's just going step, step, step. Silver's at $75. It is up $2 on the week, so it's up about 3%. So yes, it sits just over 75. Quick check in on platinum. Again, platinum is back over $2,000. It's at $2,043. It's up $65 on the week, about 3.3%. Looking at palladium as well. Palladium was the biggest mover to the upside last week. It was up 9% last week. It's also the biggest mover to the upside this week as well in terms of percentages. It is up $78. It is up 5.25%. It is sat at $1,580 at the moment. So fair play to palladium. A quick look at copper. That again, very similar story here, as you can tell. Copper's up on the week. It is at $5.79 per pound. That's per pound US. It's up 8 cents on the week. It's about 1.5%. Quick looking at natural gas as well. So natural gas, the spot price via the Pepperstone market. So this is for US. That is down. That's been down for 4 or 5 weeks in a row now. It's at $2.75, down about 2% on the week. And then if we have a look at the Dutch natural gas calendar month futures, and again, they've taken a significant impact to the downside as well. So I imagine that's quite good for Europe. Although I'll be chatting with the Wall Street Journal again on Friday. I imagine we're going to look at gas storage levels in Europe because they are dangerously low as well. But yes, it's Dutch TTF natural gas calendar month futures via the NYMEX. That is down just under 10% this week. So it's down about €4.91. Currently sitting at €45.13. So gas is something to watch out for. I must admit, I hold my hands up. I did get that wrong. I did go neutral to bullish on the European gas this week. Of course, that doesn't look like that's playing out at all. I should quickly look at uranium again. We only look at the U308 future, so again a very opaque market. Really, it's churning sideways at present. It is sat. I mean, it's down 5 cents on the week, which is 0.06%. It's currently sat at 84.75. And again, appreciate it's just a quick quick look at the futures market there in uranium. So that's all the commodities done. In a nutshell, before we go on to a couple of other news articles that I think are worthy of bringing to your attention, I should point out that the 2-week truce has been announced just as a just as a reminder. 2-week truce announced between the US and Iran. I imagine Israel is part of that as well. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, he's firing missiles or they're firing missiles. So a lot of that's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. We're starting to see US equities rally, of course, on that news. I would call that a relief rally. I could not imagine it would be overly sustained. But again, who knows? It's a very difficult environment out there at the moment, but they are in the green thus far this week. Of course, what happens in 2 weeks' time, I don't know. If hostilities resume, then they will resume, and then we're back to square one. What I think people have to remember, what us as contrarian capitalists have to remember, is the long-term picture. And again, we're not mainstream media. So again, when this truce was announced and people go, yay, shipping in Hormuz is back to normal. Again, I've never tried moving a massive oil tanker before or a goods tanker, but I imagine it's not the easiest thing to move. So if you switch the light from red to green, it doesn't just happen just like that. These things take time. So how much can get done in 2 weeks is yet to be seen. Of course, if there are more disruptions, and we go back to how it was a few weeks ago, so and so's bombing this person and blah 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 blah, then we're going to get back to much higher oil prices. Are we going to get back to much higher gas prices? Those sorts of things will happen. I did read something as well, and it's a very good point of view to bring in. And it is that what the markets and what most people are trying to price in and what they're trying to think about is either the war ending in a couple of months or possibly a couple of weeks. And what many people aren't really thinking about and the impact of it would be, what if this does result in an absolute victory for the USA? What does that look like for the markets? Now, an absolute victory for the USA, again, I am not American, so it's difficult for me to say what they should or shouldn't be doing. But the point being that not many people are thinking about it. So we do have to ask the question, what if? So what if there is a total victory for the USA? Well, what does that look like? Well, that would likely mean getting rid of everyone else that's on their hit list and bringing in uh, a new regime, basically. That to me, on a very layman's level, is what that would look like. That then might improve relations. They might set up some strategic energy deals. They might calm down everything in the Middle East. I have to say, in watching various senior officials within the US government talk about everything that's going on, to me, everyone's coming across very calm, which again could just be for media, but could also indicate that despite the craziness of what's going on, maybe they actually know what they're doing. So again, I'm just airing this out there. I'm not saying that I agree with what they're doing. Of course, on a humanitarian grounds, everything that's happened in the last month or so is obviously not good, and the quicker that ends, the better. But we have to also add a bit of contrarianism and a bit of realism into this. So I'm not supporting what the US administration is doing. Just want to make that clear. But we do have to ask the question: what does an absolute US victory look like, and what impact could that have? If Iran does become an American puppet, it's possible. If the whole thing was to get rid of the British in the first place, again, I refer to Tom Luongo, Gold Goats and Guns, then they're on track. If the aim was to help Russia in the background in terms of higher energy prices, so again, if they're selling oil at $100 a barrel rather than $70 a barrel, of course that's good for Russia's balance sheet. I also read that even Iran's making a lot more cash than it was a few months ago as a result of these higher oil prices as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here. But I would go away and ask yourselves that question as well. What does a true and absolute US victory look like? What would that look like for the markets? Would that get rid of most of the uncertainty? I'd imagine it would. If that gets rid of the uncertainty, then does that mean everything goes onwards and upwards? Possibly. Certainly on the equity side, that could happen. Would that put pressure on gold? Not really. If there was an absolute US victory, purely because the damage financially has already been done. I think it was 40 billion, 45 billion. I think the US has racked up already. Of course, add that to the debt that's already over 39 trillion. These numbers are not sustainable. But I would say go away and think about that. And so people will say, well, this could go on for months. Let's see what happens. People are also saying, well, the war could go on for weeks. Let's see what happens. And a lot of mainstream are looking at this 2-week truce and going, yay, job done. Let's get back to normal. That's not going to happen. I could tell you right now, that is not going to happen. The proverbial will hit the fan again, I imagine, moving forwards. So that leaves us with two other possibilities. Number one is an absolute US defeat, which seems unlikely from what I read and from what I understand, but it is possible, I guess. Secondly, would be again, what would an absolute US victory look like over there, and what impacts would that have? And again, I think that not many people have been thinking about that because a lot of people don't think that that is possible. And what impacts would that have on the markets? Well, again, I've just explained that. Let's see what happens really at the end of the day. That will do for the geopolitics side. A couple of other news articles that I think are worth mentioning. By the way, I should point out before I do that, people ask me, I get a lot of questions, and I try and answer them as best as I can. In terms of, and this isn't financial advice, this isn't investment advice. What I would say for those that watch and that are contrarian capitalists and have got an interest in gold, silver, platinum, if you are in a position where you're not happy with your physical holdings, i.e., you would like more, dollar cost averaging in is a very smart way to do it. Even with gold at say $4,800 at the moment, that's going to look cheap in a few years' time. So dollar cost averaging in is likely the best thing to do moving forwards. If you think you've got enough physical bullion, great, superb, I salute you. If you think you've got enough, wonderful, then start looking at mining stocks. If you want to go into equities markets, I would be strongly looking at a country like Brazil. Brazil is very undervalued at the moment, and I refer you to the Substack and the podcast episode with Tavi Costa done a few weeks ago. Brazil looks very undervalued at the moment. I also wrote a post about 5 other ideas that I'm looking at the moment as well. I will link to that. Go and check that out too, because even with the chaos that's happening, and there's going to be a lot more moving forwards, there's always opportunity. So if you like equities, look at Brazil. If you like physical bullion, dollar cost averaging in, always a smart thing to do. If you think you've got enough physical bullion, fair enough, have a look at the mining stocks. Of course, they've taken a bit of a battering in the last few weeks as well. That just smells like opportunity to me. In the same post that I've just mentioned, I also put in the latest portfolio. I've also given a general update on the channel as well. So there's some things in the background, LLCs and so forth, that are being created. Then all the various companies that have been mentioned and that have sponsored various newsletters and appeared on the show recently, I will be taking positions in them moving forwards. And that is the other question I've had. Rob, why have you had various companies on the show, but you're not in a position to have shares in them? The simple reason for that is I refer to needing to get the LLC up and running first, and then I can get the Contrarian Capitalist stuff done in the background. My current broker as well is terrible. In my opinion, they don't have good access to these various companies as well, which is why although they've been on the show and there has been some paid content, as you have probably seen, that's why I've not taken a position in them yet. It's not that I don't believe in them. I do believe in them. I'm just waiting to get all this LLC stuff sorted in the background and then transferring my brokerage account. Once that's done, I will take positions in those companies because I think it's important to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Two other articles of interest. Number one is that back to the USA, and that is that the federal budget supposedly for 2027 has requested 45 billion in nuclear funding. So obviously that's very, very, very good news. Doesn't mean it's going to get approved, but I think with everything that's been going on, as we've seen, the ups and downs in oil, we've seen the ups and downs in the last few weeks in gold, well, actually in 2026 in gold and silver. Uranium continues to go under the radar. That's good, especially again if you're looking at uranium mining stocks. And I think that 45 billion is a very good amount to be asking for. I think that the US understands that it needs to become more energy independent, and again on supply chains as well. So again, I'll put a link to that article in this post as well. I recommend you go and check that out. And secondly, a big component of Plan B is to just be prepared, just in case. Because if you're not prepared, then bad things could happen. And this other article is, I think, sobering in my opinion, and it's that German men need military permits for extended stays abroad. So Germany's looking to plop in a new military service law that requires all men under 45 to seek approval from the Bundeswehr to leave the country for longer than 3 months. It also obliges the Military Career Centre to issue it. So it's a new military service law. Apparently, it took effect actually at the start of 2026, and it's aimed at apparently boosting the strength of the armed forces amid threats to European security in the wake of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. Again, I'll link into the full article, but the reason I want to mention this is that for a lot of time now, I think a lot of people have got their head in the sand. I appreciate you as a contrarian capitalist. You are going to be much more alert than 99% of the world's population. And an article like this and information like this needs to be talked about because it sends us a sign of where we're going. Now, I could easily sit here and criticize Germany for many a reason. Its recent energy issues, self-harmed issues as well, getting rid of nuclear. All of a sudden, we're back to coal. And getting rid of nuclear is a bit of a mistake. Look how many undocumented migrants we've got in the country. Now, some of that's rich coming from someone from the UK. We also have similar problems. On that note, actually mentioning the UK, I was actually surprised that the UK government stopped Kanye West going in to the UK. I was more surprised they stopped someone going in, to be honest. Never mind the hypocrisy of that. But that being said, back to Germany. Yes, they've had a lot of issues energy-wise as well. They've really shot themselves in the foot. And having this military order come in means that if you're German and you had no plan B, you had no plan C, then you're in a bit of a pickle now because it looks like your own government's going to get you to do some military service and is going to prep you for what I imagine is going to be the meat grinder. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that jokingly. I do think other countries are going to follow as well, because to me, and I've said this for a while, I think the UK and the EU, they're preparing for a massive ground war against Russia because they still see Russia as the enemy. It's sad that they think like that. And then, when you're dealing with a lot of debt and you don't know what to do with it, the one thing that you can do is divert people's attention. And I think that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to point out that, we've got a lot of energy issues and we've got a lot of, migrant issues and, we've got a lot of price issues here, a lot of inflation going on. And we're very sorry about that. Look, a war. We've seen this playbook before. I think we're going to see it again, where it's happening in front of our very eyes. But I think the key thing to take away from this, apart from, again, German men under the age of 45 possibly being sent to a meat grinder, is that it's imperative to have a plan B. If you are German and you listen to this and you're German and you have a plan B, then superb, I salute you. If you're not from Germany and you haven't got a plan B and you don't plan on staying in your country and fighting, a potential war that's coming down the road, please, please, please do go and get a plan B. I will put in a recommendation in the post that comes with this. I've used the Jers way recently. I highly recommend you have a chat with them, look at their website. I'll put a link to their services in the post that comes with this video. Because if you have all your eggs in the basket, and again in Germany's case, let's just say you've got all your eggs in the German basket, and something like this comes along, and it looks like it's going to be mandatory, you've got no chance, and then it's likely going to be too late. If you're outside of Germany, it's not too late, but I would act quickly. That's what I would say on that. Of course, if you want to stay and fight, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to have a plan B or plan C. But this article, I think, should bring to everyone's attention what's coming down the road. And if you don't want to be a part of it, there's still time to sort that out. There's still time to sort yourselves out as well. It's never too late. Well, it's never too late until it's too late. But if you have the time and you've got a bit of spare cash going, because again, some of these programs don't cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's better to get it in your back pocket just in case. And I've done that with myself. Three residencies or 3 rights of abode in 3 different continents. I've got options there. I've done that to protect myself just in case that proverbial hits the fan. And surprise, surprise, I do not trust my government, my home government back in the UK, as far as I can throw them. But I highly recommend you read that. Again, if you are German and you're listening to this, I'm sorry to even have to read that and tell you about that. If you're not German, read it anyway, and hopefully it'll give you a bit of a kick up the backside to get your plan B and even get your plan C done as well. Internet permitting, should be back with Alyosha or Market Vibes, who you probably already know on Substack. We're scheduled to record on Thursday, the 9th of April. Broad Street Journal and myself are recording on Friday, the 10th of April. So we're back into podcasting after a bit of time off when I was in Paraguay. Of course, the commodity wrap will be with you on Friday after market close, and market wrap will be with you on Sunday. I should say, for those listening that aren't even subscribers to the Contrarian Capitalist, please do subscribe to the Contrarian Capitalist, contrariancapitalist.substack.com. You can become a free subscriber. Give the channel a go. And then when you're ready to take the leap to being a paid subscriber, then please do so. It's $11 a month if you pay monthly. If you pay annually, it works out at about $9.20 a month. And you can always become a founding member as well, which is a one-off lifetime investment. So you pay once and you're a contrarian capitalist for life. Again, I imagine I will be doing this, be running this channel for a very, very long time, because there's always going to be contrarianism in the world. So I should point out on top of that, if you're running a publication, do speak to your accountant as well, because I would imagine, don't take this as gospel, any subscription that you do could be classed as a tax deductible expense. So do speak to your accountant, your tax advisor as well. But yes, please do become a free subscriber. Give the channel a go. Then head off to being a paid subscriber. And then if you want to take that founding member leap, a one-off investment for life, do become a founding member as well. Have a fantastic week. Again, don't trust everything that you're reading in the media. Don't take everything you read with regards to this 2-week truce as gospel either. I imagine it's all going to flare up again in a couple of weeks' time. I could be proven wrong, but let's see what happens. Have a great week and speak soon.